Hi, this is Linda Noss, and this is the second video in the concentration series. So we're creating this game with a grid of buttons, and then we're going to figure out how to do our grid right now. So last time we left, we had a very simple one button that came up on a screen, and that showed us that our button class worked correctly. So now we need a whole grid of them. So how do we do that? Well, a grid is basically a two-dimensional object. When you think of a grid, you have a height, and you have a width, and you have a certain number of boxes going across and a certain number of boxes going down. So our boxes in this case are buttons. So instead of drawing one button, I want to draw a whole bunch of them. So I'm going to get rid of this here. I'm going to make it a two-dimensional array. The first one is the number of rows, and the second one is the number of columns. I'm just going to call this grid. And then down here, I don't need this anymore, and I'm not going to need that anymore because my button is gone. But I will need to know where to put this grid to start with, so I'm going to have an X value. I'm going to have a Y value. I'm going to have to also have a width and a height of my grid. Well, of each button in the grid, actually. I'm going to keep my size of my window, and the background color is still going to be black. But now I'm working with two dimensions. When you work with arrays, 9 times out of 10, you work with a for loop. So I'm going to start with my for loop, and you have to declare some kind of counter. So you have to int it right inside the loop, I equals. And when you work with an array, it always starts counting at 0. So we're going to start counting at 0 here. Let's just say I want a 4 by 4 grid. So I'm going to go from 0, and then I'm going to have a 0, 1, 2, 3. So that'll give us our 4 places because they're going to be numbered between 0, 1, 2, 3. So I want I to keep going until it hits 4, but not equal to 4. And then I want to add on 1 every time I go around the loop. So that is my for loop. And that will give us one row of the array, but we have multiple rows. So what we're going to do is create another for loop inside for the second dimension. And again, if it's a 4 by 4 grid, I'm going to do the same thing with J that I did with I, because I want it to go around 4 times. Okay, so there's my second for loop. So there's my second for loop. So now I've got this is going to be the number of rows, and this is going to be the number of boxes within each row. So now basically I want to tell the computer to create some new buttons. So the first thing I have to do is I have to create my two-dimensional array. So my two-dimensional array is called grid, and so I have to say grid, and I have to tell the computer I'm going to have this two-dimensional array of buttons, and that's going to be a 4 by 4. So this creates the 2D array. Okay, now that I've done that, I can go ahead and create each button within the array. So then I have to actually go through and new button 16 different buttons. It's a 4 by 4. So I'm just going to say grid I j equals new button. And the button constructor asks for 4 integers. So I'm going to use my 4 integers that I set up here. And I'm going to set them X, Y, W, and H. Let me just make that nice and neat. Now, here's the problem. X, Y, W, and H don't equal anything at this point in time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them each equal to something. And I'm going to make my X coordinate 60. I'm going to make my Y coordinate 60. You can choose whatever numbers you like, as long as they fit on your 500 by, the whole grid has to fit on the 500 by 500 window. So I'm going to make my width of my buttons 90 and the height. I'm going to make it a nice square, so 90. So I set them both equal to 90. So now when I create my button, it's going to place the button at 60, 60. And it's going to give it a 90 width and a 90 height. And that's great. But if I run this, let's just go ahead and display this. In order to display this, I got to display one button at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this for loop set again, paste it down here. Instead of newing the buttons, I am just going to say grid ij.display. Now, have I forgotten anything? Just think for a moment how this might look when you display it. Let's see if it even will work. Okay, it's working. I don't have any errors, but I have a logical error because I'm only showing up one button. That's because I have 16 buttons and they're all placed at the exact same place. Each time I create a new button, it's at 60, 60 with a width of 90 and a height of 90. So they're stacked on top of each other, which you can't see because we're looking straight down at the screen. It's two-dimensional. So what we have to do every time we go around this loop is we have to move the next button over. Now we want to move it over so it's completely clearing the first button. So I want to move my X value, which is right here, at least this far, which is the width of the button. But then I want a little gap too. So I think I'm going to add in 2 pixels or so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, X plus equals the width of the button plus 2. So now what happens when I do this? Okay, I'm getting some good stuff here, but it's printing out the buttons, and I guess if I made my window bigger, you would see this go on and on and on. So all 16 buttons are on the same row, and they just keep going, although I have this nice little gap in between, so I have this little outline, which is nice. But after 4 buttons, I want this 5th button to be back over here. So I want to change the Y value, because I want the Y value to go down, and I want to change the X value to go back to its original number, because I want this button here to be directly underneath this one. So I want the X to be the same, and I want the Y to be the height of the button plus, I'm going to put 2 in there again. So in between each loop, see this loop prints 1 row, so after it's printing a row, I want to change Y. So I'm going to change Y by the height, and I'm going to add a gap of 2. And then I'm going to change X back to the beginning, which I think we had it at 60 to start with. So here is that. So let's see what happens now. Okay, I've got my grid, and it's a beautiful thing. And because I have a random fill, the colors are different every time. So that's good. I've got my grid going, and now all I have to do is figure out how to put pictures on each one of these things and flip them over. So in video 3, I think I'm going to create a grid object, and then I can start working with different methods in that. We'll see you next time. Bye.